I'm Liz Hirsch-Naftali, and welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And today I have the pleasure of virtually having a coffee with Mayor Karen Bass, Mayor of Los Angeles. Mayor Bass is formerly a U.S. Congresswoman from Los Angeles. And while she is a politician, we're not here to talk about politics and policy. We are here to really talk about the heart and the humanity, something that I think all of us believe might be missing a little bit in our political world, and something that would be really important for all of us to embrace. I will start by saying welcome, Mayor Bass. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
And just as a way of introduction, you're a woman of quite a few firsts. So you are the first woman mayor of Los Angeles, first female leader.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you also were the first African American and the first woman in U.S. history to serve as a speaker of the state legislative body when you were the California State Assembly's 67th speaker. You know, I think that one of the ways that we really like to talk about our leaders is what they have done and having been a first, and what it means to be a first and obviously not to be a last.
Absolutely. That's for sure.
So as a way of saying thank you for coming, I would love for you to start by just telling us a little bit about what it means to be a mayor, what it means to be the mayor of Los Angeles, and what makes Los Angeles special.
Absolutely. Well, let me just start with what makes Los Angeles special. And Liz, thank you so much for including me in your podcast. I love our city because it's like living in the middle of the entire world. Everybody is here. The breadth and the diversity of Los Angeles. I mean, where is it that you could go surfing and skiing in the same day, in our region? I'm born and raised here, and Los Angeles has given me a lot, and I'm just incredibly honored and humbled to be able to give back to the city by leading the city at this particular time.
And can you talk a little bit about like what it means to be the mayor? Because being a mayor is like nonpartisan. Everybody, it doesn't matter which side, what group, you are the mayor for everybody, which is a beautiful thought, but it's also could be challenging, I assume.
Well, actually, after, 18 years of being in a partisan environment, I really enjoy being in an environment where party affiliation doesn't matter. Now, I do have to say that we're an overwhelmingly Democratic city, and our city council is, all Democrats, but Democrats on the spectrum. That doesn't mean that everybody feels the same way. But being a mayor means the buck stops with you. So you tend to be charged with responsibility for everything. But when it gets to the weather and traffic and all of those things, I'm honored to have the responsibility. But different from being a legislator, where you are responsible for passing legislation, and in Congress, that means you have to get 217 people to agree with you. Or if you're in the state legislature, it's more like 40 or 50 people to agree with you. That's a lot more labor intensive in a different kind of way. Being a mayor, the rubber hits the road right here. So there are problems that you can solve right on the spot. And I really enjoy that, Liz, because for so many years I was working on the 30,000 foot level. Well, this is the 1
You're
foot
in the
level.
weeds.
So if it's an issue, absolutely. Yeah. If it's an issue of when our freeway caught fire and the freeway was going to be shut down for what we thought was months, that was immediately a crisis. Or when LA was potentially going to face a hurricane, something that no Angelino born and raised here even knows what that is like. We don't experience rain in the summer. We rarely experience rain at all. And so the challenge of immediately having to go into action and response is exhilarating, intimidating, and rewarding all at the same time.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah. So you were born in LA, you were raised in LA. Could you, and I know you went to Hamilton High School. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up with your parents and your family, and LA, what it meant to you growing up there? Because obviously LA has changed, but for people like yourself, and I was born and raised in LA, it had a very special place in my heart for when I was young and growing up in the city.
Well, absolutely. I was extremely fortunate to have two amazing, very stable parents, very stable family. the only girl with three brothers. And so that certainly prepared me for politics. It prepared me for leadership.
Mhm.
But during the years that I was growing up was a years of incredible change. I mean, post-civil rights movement, the city, the country, the world was in turmoil. And all of that to me was very exciting. And I couldn't wait to grow up so I could be a part of a movement for change. And that has been at the center of my life since I was a child. So I grew up wanting to do nothing other than what I'm doing today. Now, I never thought about being a politician. I never thought about running for office. But what I was consumed by was my desire to change the community, to change the country for the better.
Right. And I understand that your father and you watched some TV together and watched a lot about civil rights and politics, and that was an inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about that?
My mother was very unusual because she was born in Los Angeles, and African Americans really didn't come to LA in large numbers until after World War II and what is known as the Great Migration. So my father was a part of the Great Migration,
Mm.
escaping the South, escaping the violence, segregation, and racism of the South. He came from Texas after World War II. And I grew up sitting next to him either in front of the TV or on the radio because we didn't have 24-hour news during that time. But he got me interested and addicted to watching the news compulsively, something that I continue to do today. And that opened my eyes to what was going on in the South. And he explained to me, as somebody who escaped violence, he explained to me what living in the South was like, what the movements were like, and why people were doing sit-ins, and what Martin Luther King was really trying to accomplish. So I grew up watching that. But then Hamilton High School and also the West LA community, the Pico, Fairfax, Pico, La Cienega area, which is and was a predominantly Jewish area,
Right.
was also one of the centers of progressive activism.
So talk a little bit about that because you were a young Black woman, a teenager, and you went to Hamilton, and I assume that many of the students were Jewish.
Like
Okay, so talk
80%.
about that.
And Hamilton was a Jewish high school, and I went to Hancock Park
For
Elementary
both
School,
public
where I
schools,
was
to be
the
clear, both
only,
public schools. Yeah.
both public schools, yes. Hancock Park, I was the only non-Jewish person in my class. So I learned of Yom Kippur when I showed up to school and nobody was there in my
Okay,
class
well,
but
yeah, that
me.
would have been a hard reveal, exactly. But it was a community that was inclusive? Was it a community of because if you were all involved in things of, like, civil rights, and how did that feel?
Well, it was not quite all inclusive.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that there were a lot of parents who were activists. And so, frankly, I learned how to conduct a meeting and write my first flyer from
Yeah.
parents who were activists. There was the Workman Center on La Cienega near Pico. And so there were, for the parents who were inclusive, they tended to be activist oriented. They were anti-Vietnam War. They were involved in the peace movement. The civil rights movement was kind of winding up and transitioning into another phase when I was growing up.
And did you have a teacher or somebody that was a mentor when you were young?
The teachers that I had at Hamilton were very much activists. They were mentors, and that was extremely positive, but it had a negative side too, because they were very helpful in terms of helping me to understand the problems and the contradictions in our country, but they weren't very solution oriented.
Hmm.
And that was very confusing for an adolescent.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when you went to school, higher education, you studied social work and that was your passion, which was to help people.
Actually, my passion was to help people, but I didn't study social work until I was in Congress. So my education was in healthcare. First, I trained as a nurse, and then I trained as a physician assistant. So I was interested in helping people immediately, but my true love was in systemic change and international
Right.
change. And so my day job was helping people immediately, but it never occurred to me, Liz, that I could make a living off of systemic change. So that's what I did after work and on the weekends, I focused on macro level change. How do we change U.S. foreign
Yeah.
policy? How do we change domestic policy? How do we deal with the problems that communities were having with police? Police abuse was a real issue. LAPD at the time was very, 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 very conservative.
So, having said that, I also know that a passion for you has been young people, and you've done a lot with foster care. And I also know that in your personal life, one of the things as mayor you've talked about that, I think it was at your State of the Union, you mentioned that your newest grandchild was sleeping in the room, and your family was there, and you're smiling. But I know that you also had the loss of your daughter and her husband, and that has a huge effect. But I also understand that you have these 4 children, and you do have a beautiful family. Is it fair to ask you to talk a little bit about that? Just so I think that people can understand. You're smiling and you're this amazing, powerful woman, but you've had some struggles. It has not been easy.
No, 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 no. It has not been easy. In terms of my family, though, when my husband and I divorced and he remarried and had 3 children, we raised our children
Mhm.
together. And so it wasn't a step, it wasn't a half, they were all
Right.
siblings. And so my stepchildren, technically, I have been in their life since the day they were born. They're all now in their 30s. And so my stepdaughter lives with me along with my 3
Oh,
grandsons.
3. Sorry, I thought, okay.
Well, it's 2, but then one was just
Right, okay.
born 7 weeks
Right.
ago.
So you have a big
So
house.
he's the newest addition. But yes, I lost my daughter and my son-in-law. And when you have something that happens like that overnight, one day you're talking to them and it's the last time you will ever talk to them. It's life
Yeah.
changing. It definitely is life changing. I will tell you that, some of the joy of life kind of goes away, but you learn how to manage and function because you have no choice.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think I unfortunately know too many people who've lost children, and there's a strength in hearing other people's stories.
One of the traditions, if you will, is if you're a parent who's lost a child and you know of somebody who's lost a child, you typically reach out to
Yeah.
them and say you're now a member of a club you never wanted to be a part
Yeah.
of. So there is a, you know, emotional connection that you make with other parents. And I will do that if there's somebody that I know, I reach out to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Can you talk about the foster children and why that was important for you and that has been important? Because how do we take care of young people?
When I was growing up, my mother took care of everybody's kids. I mean, she just did that. There were always kids in the house. So I think I grew up really with a belief that as an adult, you're responsible for children, not necessarily your own biological children, but you're responsible for children. And so what happened with me specifically on that issue, though, in 1990, I was a full-time faculty member at USC Medical School. In the African American community, there was a crisis connected to crack cocaine and gang violence. And I left my teaching job to go to the epicenter of that crisis and to start an organization to try to figure out how we shift public policy away from punishing individuals who have problems,
Yeah.
but actually work on their health, because addiction to me is a health issue. Unfortunately, during that time, that was not the way society viewed it. And so the African American community was punished. And when that punishment happened, for example, the incarceration rate for African American women increased 800%. When you incarcerate a woman, then the children fall between the cracks. And that led to a massive increase in the foster care system. And that's what got me involved. I actually didn't know anything about foster care. The other thing that was unique to the crack cocaine epidemic was it was the first time women became addicted equal to men. So drug treatment programs were not set up for men. Jails and prisons were not set up for men. And so I started working on foster care advocacy. And at the time, grandmothers a lot were saddled with their grandchildren, sometimes on a moment's notice. But society punished the grandmothers because they said that the reason why their kids were addicted was because of something they did wrong. So if you were a grandmother, you were given no financial support to
Yeah.
take care of your grandchildren. But as a society, we paid strangers to take care of children. But a 70-year-old grandmother, it was viewed like, well, that's your obligation. And
True.
so we organized the grandmothers and we fought for the grandmothers to have resources. Now that's passe. I mean, people today would think that making a statement like that was crazy, but that was the common belief at the time. It is no longer the common belief. Now, grandparents, aunts, and uncles are encouraged to take the children and they are supported financially as well as with social service resources, something that was non existent 30 years ago.
Yeah. So you basically went from helping people in the community with the injustice and the drugs and putting together the coalition. And then you understood that then what was missing and what was really devastating was the children, and they needed to be taken care of. And so basically, the reason why I bring this up and sort of to centralize the thought is like you're just somebody that sees a problem and you go and you try to fix it and you work with
Right.
others to fix it. You don't say I alone will fix it, but you work with others and you understand like how do we make a long-term change while we at the same time fix things in the short term, which I think is a really sign of a person, not just a good leader, but a good person who understands that you have to have both lanes and you have to work hard in both of them at the same time.
Exactly. I think I'm better, though, working on the policy level because I have a difficulty with boundaries, especially when it comes to children.
Yeah.
So, for example, yesterday we had about 15 former foster youth, young adults here in the city, and they were shadowing members of the city council.
Mm.
And then the board of supervisors hosted them for breakfast. And the young person who was shadowing me, she told me of challenges in her life, and I'm immediately wanting to solve them. And it's better that I stay at the 30,000 foot level because I just feel an incredible responsibility.
Right. However, I will say, hearing that story, two things come into my mind. One, that she could spend the day with the mayor, an African American woman who knows her whys, her whos, her hows, and just to have that experience and to be heard by you, I think is hugely important. Because I also look at you being the first woman mayor, the second African American mayor of Los Angeles, and that many children in America in Los Angeles can look and say, hey, you know what? I can be that.
Yes.
I like to say that when I was a little girl, I didn't know a woman could be the vice president or the president.
Right.
But now young people and little kids and little girls and boys can look up and see what possibilities there are. And so I think that's an important for us to always keep in mind.
Oh, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, I'm a swimmer. I love to swim and I wanted to be a lifeguard and girls were not allowed to be lifeguards then. So, it's that, I mean, so many barriers have been lifted, but because the barriers have been lifted, it doesn't mean that you don't encounter obstacles or resistance or, a lot of challenges along the way.
Yeah. Okay. So now that you said about being a swimmer and talking a little bit more about some of your likes and activities, I'm going to ask you some rapid questions. They're pretty easy, but feel free to answer them however, one word or a sentence or however you'd wish. The first one's easy, I think. What is your favorite sound?
Favorite sound? Oh, no, a violin.
Okay, that's a good one. Your favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite smell?
Good food.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, on that one, so if you had to pick a meal that was your favorite meal, what would that be?
Oh yeah, you already know.
I know, but I haven't revealed it to everyone here.
Salmon.
I love it.
Salmon is my favorite. Salmon, kale, spinach. Those are my favorite foods. I'm a healthy eater. I always have been.
And I'm assuming your mom made that food back when you were young as well.
Yes, she did. And because she was a diabetic, she always had us, my whole life, we always ate healthy.
Yeah. And I know you like to ride bikes, but I know being a mayor prevents you from having a lot of freedom to just ride around LA. Do you still get to ride bikes? And what other exercise do you do? Do you still swim?
I do swim. I do ride bikes, but I ride on the beach. I don't ride through LA traffic. I just have company with me now.
Yeah, you don't get to ride alone.
And I'm used to riding by myself. I like to ride and swim alone.
But as mayor, you don't always have that anymore.
They allow me my space, so it's okay.
Great. Good, good. And when you're biking, do you have a music list, a playlist that you listen to?
No, I don't listen to music, actually.
Mm.
I don't listen to music. I listen to the sounds all around me.
Wow. Okay, that's nice. I know that you don't have a lot of time, but if you had a household chore, what would be your favorite household chore to be doing?
I like to wash dishes as I think when I'm washing
Mhm.
dishes.
What if you were to like say what is Karen Bass's superpower? What would you say that is?
I don't know. I mean, I think, well, my mother raised us and said that being nice is very easy. And I find it very easy. I don't understand when people are not kind. I just really don't. It's so easy just to be pleasant.
I know the way you said it, like it's not a superpower; it should just be innate. But I think in some cases, being a leader that is nice is perhaps your
Well, I
superpower.
think the other thing is being inclusive and not being ego driven.
Yeah,
So to me, the power comes from having other people with you, not doing it alone. You know, when I was in the state legislature and I wanted to do foster care legislation, I did a lot of bills. I didn't put my name on them. I gave them to other legislators. And I had mine, but I wanted everybody to do bills. So we had about 25 members of the legislature who all had bills on foster
yeah,
care.
yeah,
And that meant we could get an awful lot done. So it's never about what I could do myself. It's just like right now. I mean, historically, the mayor's office has always been in opposition to the council. To me, that doesn't make any sense. Instead of viewing it 1 versus 15, I view it as 16. And
yeah.
instead of viewing it as the mayor versus the board of supervisors, I work with them.
Right. Well, I also know that when you were in the state legislature, you also worked with the then Governor Schwarzenegger.
Well,
I mean,
I absolutely worked with him. And when I was in Congress, I worked with Kevin McCarthy. And Kevin McCarthy and I are friends.
yeah, which is sign to me of where we should always be, which is working with people that are different opinions, different ideas, but that will strengthen us by working together. So maybe that's also part of your superpower.
Well, my motto is I keep my eyes on the prize.
Yeah.
And that is my objective, not trampling on people to be, the first, but just trying to get something done.
Yeah. No, I think it's really special. So let's say you didn't have to work one day or for a weekend, or you could go away. Where would be a dream place to travel that isn't as mayor, but as Karen Bass?
To the Caribbean, the beach, the ocean. I love the ocean. I don't like to swim in the ocean at all, but I love the ocean.
And I think the Caribbean's a little warmer than the oceans off of Santa Monica and Malibu.
Yeah, absolutely. The other place, I would go any number of African countries. I spent, when I was in Congress, working on Africa was one of the main things I did. And I miss that. I miss going to Africa. I would go to Africa all the time in Congress.
But as a mayor, do you travel to places that
No, I don't think, we have an emergency here, which is why I ran because of the homeless situation. And so I went to Paris. I'm going to go to Paris 3 more times because of the Olympics, because of my responsibility for the Olympics. But no, I will not spend a lot of time. I could. I'm invited all the time. I just don't think it's appropriate.
So that's 2 points. So the Olympics will be in Los Angeles in 2028.
2028.
And, I appreciate what you said about the unhoused, the homeless, that is your priority. And I think that is something that I know is been many years in the making. And and it's not a political question, it's not a partisan, but what gets you up in the morning, and even after a day that's really rough on on what you're trying to accomplish, what gets you up in the morning that says, okay, I'm going to start again, or I'm going to build on it?
As long as in the nation's second largest city, one of the wealthiest cities in the world, there are people sleeping on the street, it gets me up every morning.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that there's been a generation of young people who've grown up, and this is the only thing they've ever seen. So they think it's normal. And those of us that have lived a little longer know that this was not the case.
Well, my last question, which it piggybacks on a lot of what we've talked about, which is, what does joy mean to you? What brings you joy? And if you have joy, how do you share that joy with others? It could be personal and politically, but the idea of joy.
On the same subject, it is absolutely a joyful experience to me to be in the street with my team when they are going to tents and telling people, let's go. But when I've done that, what I say to people is that you deserve better than this. You deserve better than this. You do not have to live like this.
Right.
And the tears that come to their eyes when they tell me, I thought I was going to die like this. I never thought I would be able to get off the street. That brings me incredible joy. And then children and young people always bring me joy.
Yeah. And do you feel, how do you share your joy? Is that through your work? Is that through just talking with young people and just being with people in your community?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a very specific example. The two women that are in charge of the work to get people off the streets, I met them and started working with them when they were 14 years old. They were two of our original youth members, the youth arm of Community Coalition, and they're running the work now. And they are both in their mid-40s.
Wow. Yeah. Well, first, I want to say thank you. And I think about like the fact that you get up every day with a lot of really incredible challenges. You are the mayor of one of the biggest cities in America, one of the greatest economies in America. And at the end, most of what you've talked about is the people, the children, the people that you share each day with and that you work with. And I think that just sort of says who you are, which is that you really look at this as about changing lives, which is what you've done your whole life. But you have taken on a huge challenge, which is to be the mayor of Los Angeles. And you've looked at it as like really trying to make many, many people's lives one by one and collectively better. And I just say thank you because that's inspiring and means a lot to hear from you. And thank you for what you do.
Well, you are welcome, but it is also very much what you do. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Ciao.